Bitcoin. What are you doing? Bitcoin. What are you doing? Hello and welcome, friends. It's been a while. It's been a while since last video. I admit I have made a small pause because the market was so insanely boring and ugly that I'm sorry I couldn't bring myself to do any videos for this channel. Also, I have another YouTube channel which takes up a lot of time, so I didn't unfortunately have the motivation and time to do also regular updates on the crypto market. But I will try my best now to do from time to time at least some videos here on this channel and to analyze the crypto market, because I think we are now at an incredibly insane time, a pivotal moment in the history of the crypto market. And I want to explain to you what I think is going to happen in the crypto market and what we can expect in the next months or 1 to 2 years. And you might be surprised to find out that it's not what most people think that is going to happen. So let's take a look at this annoying market, which has really annoyed us. I think I made the last video sometime around here. Yeah, it must have been last year in summer, because I was already foreseeing that this might be a gruesome time in the market, because I think in my last video I saw like, okay, we have a bear flag in this dump here, right? We were making a classic bear flag, and then we broke down to the downside, and we had all this drama going on with Terra Luna and I don't know what, FTX and all this stuff. But the reality is that Bitcoin just did what it always does. It did a brutal bear market. I was just quite surprised, like certainly many other people and other traders in the crypto market, that Bitcoin did not even reach 100K. I mean, that was quite insane. Bitcoin just went to this level here, the 60 to 70K level, which certainly surprised many people, because it is a far worse performance than what Bitcoin did before. If we look at the first bull run, I mean, the first bull run went from, I don't know, a few cents here, 6 cents, all the way to $32, which is like 54,600% increase, like, so a factor of 500. And then the second bull run was a factor of 600. And then the third bull run was a factor of still an impressive 117. And then the third bull run gives us what? A factor of 20. So everyone was surprised that Bitcoin had such a very poor performance, and everybody was, including me by the way, was expecting 100K plus. I was not in the camp of, how is he called, Plan B with his stock to flow, which predicted like a few 100K. I was not entirely on board with this prediction, but I was certainly seeing 100K or 150K Bitcoin in 2021. So I was also taken by surprise when Bitcoin actually didn't go as far. And now, of course, in hindsight, we know why this happened. This, of course, happened because right here at this moment, the Fed decided to start raising the interest rates, right? And even though Bitcoin is always proclaimed as this magical savior which will save us from high inflation, well, guess what? Turns out that Bitcoin actually doesn't behave so well in a high inflation environment, which is quite hilarious, because this is actually what Bitcoin was designed to do. And now we found that, okay, wow, Bitcoin has brutally fallen down because the Fed has started to raise interest rates. And now we would, of course, like to understand what is going to happen next. What is this thing now? We went down, right? We went down like in a classic bear market by like, 77.5%, which certainly, even though not as brutal as before with like 84%, or like here with 87%, or this one was even more insane with like minus 94% almost. So this bear market was certainly not quite as brutal, but still insane enough to qualify as a real bear market. So we would of course like to know what comes next. Because now of course everybody will tell you the following, that of course naturally as every time the magical 4-year cycle will save us from certain doom, and the magical 4-year cycle will fix everything because the next halving will magically make the Bitcoin price go again to over 100k like in every cycle because magical 4-year cycle. Now, the people who have watched my previous videos know that I am not a believer in the 4-year cycle. I think the 4-year cycle does not exist. Let's try to understand why I think that the 4-year cycle doesn't exist, okay? So first of all, what people will tell you now is the following. They will say, of course, hey, the next halving will take place, I think it's currently scheduled sometime around April or May 2024. So let's draw a vertical line here sometime in April or May 2024. That is when the next halving will be. And then they will say it will happen like the last halving. So the last halving I think was in August 2020. And the one before that was sometime in summer 2016. I don't know the exact date anymore, but just around that time here. And then the last time before that was in November 2012, if I remember correctly. Okay, so you had all these halving events. And then, of course, afterwards, we saw every time a large up movement, except this time when actually it started dumping and the up movement came a bit later and was not so impressive. But yet still, we could still say, hey, after the halving, we had an up movement. So of course, naturally, what people will now tell you, they will say, oh, so now we will of course do what we did before, right? We will wobble around a bit, but nothing too impressive, nothing too impressive. And then when the halving comes afterwards, bam, we will go up. Magically, of course, because the halving will make the price magically go up. And my theory is that the importance of the halving has diminished much more than it used to be. So the halving indeed used to have a bigger impact because the inflation of Bitcoin was really quite high in the early days. Like we were talking about 8% inflation. 8% inflation. And of course, if it goes from 8 to 4, that is a quite significant drop. But now if we look at current inflation, current Bitcoin inflation is about 1.8%, right? Yeah, 1.8%. So it goes from 1.8% to 0.9%. That impact is not as high anymore as if it would go from 8 to 4%. So I think, okay, that the importance of this halving is far, far lower than the importance of the early halvings, and that the halvings actually don't play a big role anymore. Okay, in my opinion, they don't play a big role anymore. So now, because many people expect the same thing to happen as before, yeah, they will just copy paste stuff that happened before. They will just copy paste it and they say, look, we started out similarly to here. Yeah, we started out similarly to here, so of course a very similar thing will happen now. We will go to 50,000, then wobble around for a time. Maybe we have like some dump event like the COVID crash in 2020. Of course, it will be something different now. It will be initiated by something different, but still there might be something like that. And then afterwards we go on a huge rampage. So I think, guys, listen to me now. I think that because this happened before, the likelihood that this will happen again now is brutally low. Because let's look at history, every time something different happened, right? If I would have just copy pasted the stuff that happened in 2013 and overlaid it to here, you see that actually it doesn't fit at all anymore. It took much, this thing here, what happened in 2015 to 2017, took much longer, and it looked completely different. It was not the same than what happened in 2013. And if we then look at what happened in 2019 to 2021, if I would have just copy pasted this stuff here and overlaid it here, you can see it does not fit at all, because then we would have gone to over 200,000. So there is the recency bias in crypto. People just see what happened the last cycle, and then they say, oh, this is what happened the last cycle. I think it's pretty likely that this is going to happen again. But in my opinion, the exact opposite is true. So because last time something happened, I think there's a very high probability that this thing exactly will not happen, that we can actually exclude it. So it is quite hilarious to me that now people are just copy pasting the last cycle and overlaying it, and they say, of course we'll do something very similar, when the last times also this didn't work. And by the way, the 4-year cycle, if we just look at the time frames, they also don't fit. So if we say date range, how long did the first cycle take? Okay, 336 days. The second cycle was 742 days. The third cycle was 1071 days. And the fifth cycle to the top was 1092 days. So we have like 4 vastly different time frames. You could say that these two are somewhat similar, the last two, but even then you would need to have a lot of fantasy, because the halvings occurred at a few months difference. So it takes a lot of fantasy to say that there is some 4-year cycle. And in my opinion, what is much more important for the future of Bitcoin is, of course, what the stock market is going to do, okay? Bitcoin, we would like it not to be so, but Bitcoin has a very high correlation to the American stock market. And if I just overlay the S&P 500 on a new price scale, okay, I just overlay this thing, we can certainly say that this entire time, the S&P 500 was in the bull market, okay? And we can see that every time when there was a peak in Bitcoin, look here, there was also a peak in the S&P 500, at least to some extent. This might be the only exception here in late 2013, but even here, look at this correlation. Like, you even have this dump exactly happening at the same time in 2018, the COVID crash in 2020, then this rampage here also at almost a similar time. The top in November 2021 also occurred at almost the same time. Let me just drag this lower here. And the bear market also at the very same time. And now at the moment that the S&P 500 starts going up again, Bitcoin is also starting to go up again. So there's a very high likelihood that Bitcoin will exactly do what the stock market is going to do. So if we want to understand what Bitcoin is going to do, we have to understand what the stock market is going to do, right? And if the stock market just continues to go on a rampage, then yes, then I agree we could see Bitcoin doing the same thing that it did before and we get a new cycle. But if the stock market now, for whatever reason, dumps brutally, I can assure you that Bitcoin will not just continue setting new all-time highs. Instead, Bitcoin will pretend I'm like, oh, I'm Bitcoin, I'm your savior, please invest in me, your money will be saved from inflation and from the stock market dump, and then suddenly, boom, it goes down the same way that the stock market goes down, okay? So what I think will happen now is very much based on what the stock market is going to do. So I see 2 scenarios now for Bitcoin, okay? I see 2 scenarios. I see the first scenario that will take everyone by surprise is that if Bitcoin goes on a rampage, on a huge rally, it will do much sooner than everybody expects. It must be a psychological surprise to everyone, because the market must remain unpredictable, because the market is a maximum pain machine for every market participant. So the market tries to screw over everyone in the market. So it always tries to do something unexpected. And what would be very unexpected now, right? What everybody would expect would be a repeat of what happened here. I said it before, that is what everybody expects. So I think this can be excluded. So I think what's going to happen is either we directly go into a massive bull run from here, directly, without any delays, or we go a bit higher maybe still, and then bam, we just go much lower and follow the stock market. If the stock market should crash this year or early next year or whenever, Bitcoin will follow. And how deep will Bitcoin go? Well, you might not be happy to hear it, but Bitcoin could go all the way back to these levels here at $2,000 or $3,000. So the support, the long-term support, should Bitcoin make new lows, okay? Let me just draw this here. It's this rectangle. Bitcoin would go to prices that you cannot even imagine. It would go to the $2,000 or $3,000 range should the stock market brutally crash. But Bitcoin would first try to convince you very thoroughly that, oh, I'm your savior, please buy me because I will protect you from this brutal stock market crash that is going on. So Bitcoin will convincingly do, however this might look here, right? We could wobble around here, but it will certainly try to go towards 40 or 45,000, and then bam, it goes much lower than everybody expects. So I only see these two possibilities for psychological reasons, because nobody's expecting this stuff. Nobody is expecting two things right now. The first thing being a brutal rampage where without pause we just continue towards over 100K, or the second option, we just do some weird stuff, then go to 45,000 and then brutally dump to the $2,000 to $3,000 area. These are the two things that nobody's expecting right now. And if I take history as an example, nobody expected here the top at 70,000 or 69,000. Everybody thought it would go to 150, 200, 300,000. That took almost everybody by surprise. So I think we can just not copy paste what happened in the past and extrapolate it into the future. I think that because something happened in the past, we can actually exclude it. It will not happen the same way as it happened in this cycle here in 2019 to 2021. It will not happen as it happened here in 2016 to 2017. And it will also not happen as it happened in 2013. So I think Bitcoin will surprise us. And the only two surprises which I see that would just completely blow everyone's mind would be only that Bitcoin goes on a brutal rampage, or it pretends to do a rally, and instead this will be a brutal dead cat bounce. It will be rejected by this resistance here at around 45,000, and then bam, we go to insane lows, okay? We go to brutal lows that are just absolutely ridiculous. Now, what is my inclination? What do I think will happen? Well, I have a favorite scenario based on something which we all don't like so much, namely the famous yield curves, okay? Let us look at the yield curve inversion. So this is the 10-year yield minus the 2-year yield, US government bond yields, of course. And we can see, okay, we are brutally inverted, okay? So the yield of 2-year government bond yields is actually higher than the yield of 10-year government bond yields. So there's an inversion, so something is strange, something is not right in the markets. And let's just look at what happened the last times when the yield curve was inverted so brutally, okay? What happened the last times? Let's just overlay the S&P 500, for example, right? Let's just overlay and see what happened. So, okay, we had the brutal yield curve inversion in the late 80s. What happened? Brutal dump here in 1990, okay? We had the yield curve inversion in the 2000s. What happened? Bam, huge dumps, dot-com bubble crash, market dumped brutally. We had a yield curve inversion in 2007. What happened later? Bam, market crashed brutally. Big financial crisis, right? We had a small yield curve inversion even in 2019. What happened? Bam, the COVID crash. So hilariously, the yield curve, the US government bonds, even foresaw what everyone was saying is unpredictable, the black swan event. The bond market even foresaw the COVID crash. Just think about how insane that is. So the the government bond yields now are so insanely inverted, okay? They are so insanely inverted how we haven't seen them since, I think, this chart, if it would go back even further in time, I think in the early 80s and late 70s, we had similar levels of inversion, okay? So we are now super inverted. And we can say that every time after an inversion, I mean, we can zoom in a bit more. Let me just like remove these drawings, and let me put a vertical line every time we had the lowest point in inversion. Okay, lowest point in inversion here, then lowest point in inversion here, right? Then lowest point in inversion here, and then lowest point in inversion probably here. Okay, right? So what happened every time? Here in this inversion in 2000, it immediately brutally went down. Okay, after this inversion in 2007, the market still continued rallying for a few months, and then bam, brutal dump in the big financial crisis. What happened here in this inversion? So in August or September 2019 inversion, what happened? The market still rallied for a few months, bam, brutal crash. So now we have the lowest point in inversion here in March. What happens? The market is rallying, and what, guys, do you think will come next? What do you think will come next? Will this time be different? You know, there's the hilarious saying, this time it's different. It could be different. Past indicators, past performance are not necessarily a 100% guarantee of what's going to happen in the future, but we can take it as a guideline. We can say the market, you know, history doesn't always repeat, but it rhymes. So we can say that because the yield curve is super inverted right now, there is certainly a scenario where we might continue for a few more weeks or months upward, and then bam, suddenly we get like an insane correction of the magnitude possibly of the COVID crash, or even of a more insane magnitude. Nobody knows how long it will take and how exactly it will go, but there's a high likelihood, because of this insane inversion, that there will be a strong correction in the stock market, right? So what exactly does that mean now for Bitcoin? Well, that unfortunately, friends, means for Bitcoin, I mean, I can overlay this, right? I mean, I can overlay this here on our Bitcoin price chart, right? I can overlay this on this Bitcoin price chart. So the S&P 500 in orange. So we said now that the yield curve is super inverted, right? And we said this occurred in March. The low was in March. So what could happen now is that the S&P 500 continues to rally for a few more weeks or months, and then this insane inversion effect takes place. We saw it's always with a delay, so it can happen that the market still rallies for a few more weeks or months, but then this effect will take place, and then bam, we might see a brutal correction in the stock market. And I can tell you there's a very high likelihood that Bitcoin then in this case would also continue a bit more upwards and then get brutally dragged down to lows that we cannot even imagine, because Bitcoin has never yet seen a real stock bear market. Through its entire existence, Bitcoin has only been in a stock bull market, right? That was always the case. Look at this. It has always been in a stock bull market. The only time when there was a strong correction was here in the 2020 crash. And look what happened. It dragged Bitcoin down insanely. So we must keep in mind, friends, that this is a real possibility. So to sum it up, to sum this video up one last time, I don't think that we are going to see a repeat of what happened in the last cycles. I absolutely do not think it. I think that because these things happen in the last cycles, we can absolutely exclude them. So I see two scenarios. I see one scenario where we just continue ripping onwards straight to over 100K, because everyone would be like mind blown, taken by surprise. Or, in my opinion, the more realistic scenario based on the yield curve, which I showed you before, is that we are wobbling around here, and then we are pretending to go to 40,000 or higher, and then everyone is getting bullish, like, wow, we are back at 40 to 50,000 levels. That is not far away from all-time high. Amazing, and we are nearing the halving. The halving is not far away, so this is super bullish. And then what does Bitcoin do? Bam, goes down with the stock market. So keep in mind, I think that is indeed a quite likely scenario that we should not exclude just because we don't like it. Do I like it? No. Why should I like it? But I'm just telling you that this is like a real possibility, and we should keep in mind that this certainly is a real possibility, even though we don't like it. That is what I wanted to make this video about. I will try to upload videos from time to time. I cannot promise you that it will be on a daily basis or whatever, but if there are huge inflection points in the market, such as the time we're right now, which basically will decide the course of Bitcoins for the coming years, if not 5 years of time frame, I think at such huge inflection points, I just have to make a video in order to just say, hey, look friends, be careful, okay? Be careful out there. Don't believe the hypes. Don't believe the 4-year cycle gurus, right? Bitcoin will just magically continue going up forever without big corrections. Of course, yeah, probably the price of Bitcoin on the long time frames, 10, 15, 20 years, will be higher than now. But what happens in between? It could go first much lower until it goes much higher. So always try to see that Bitcoin is very correlated to the stock market. I wish it wasn't so, but that's the reality we live in. And so we have to be careful not to get tricked by Bitcoin, because it likes to do new things that nobody is expecting, okay? So that is what I wanted to tell you, friends. And yeah, I will try to make videos from time to time. I don't know how often, but I will do my best. And yeah, until then, thanks for watching. Thanks for watching this video, and see you next time. Ciao!